Welcome to the Boomer Briefing Podcast, where we help you solve a critical business issue in 20 minutes or less. I'm your host, John Hubbard, shareholder and consultant here at Boomer Consulting. And with me today is Ariana Campbell. Hi, Ariana. Thank you for being on the episode of the Boomer Briefing.
John, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Ariana is shareholder and consultant here at Boomer Consulting and specializes in process and leadership, among other things. And actually, Ariana and I have been working a lot together over the last, year or so on the topic of client experience. And Ariana, you talk a lot about the evolution of the client experience. And, you and I both know, as we have had a lot of conversations with firms, that most firms struggle to define and understand client experience, both from an internal perspective. What does that mean from our internal workflow, or maybe how departments work together, and also from an external perspective in terms of we want to deliver more value to our clients through maybe offering new services or better service. And so there's just a lot there. So I think we have a lot to talk about on this episode. So, Ariana, just to tee it up, why is it important for firms to understand this evolution and maybe give a little bit of the background about the type of evolution that's happening here?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we think about the opportunity that's happening within firms now, I think we're all familiar with the transition from compliance to being more advisory and consultative. That is nothing new. But I think with that, firms are really starting to understand how client experience plays into that. And it's important because as firms are really utilizing more services within the firm, we have to think about what their experience looks like as they're working with our firm. And firms are seeing that in some cases, and in a lot of cases, depending on what services they're getting a different experience. So it's almost like they're working with three different organizations. So I work with the tax department, I work with the audit department, I work with the client accounting services department. And it is truly disjointed experiences that are happening within a silo. And so as our clients are utilizing more and more of the services within the firm, we really have to be thinking about, what does that look like for them? What's the experience for them? What are those different touch points like as they're working with our firm? And this is different than client service. Within those cases, firms are usually providing a high level of client service in each of those departments. It's just that the experience that the client is actually getting as they're working with each of those different areas looks different. And that can be disconcerting as a client. And it's a place where we have an opportunity to really provide more value to them through thinking about it from their point of view and connecting the dots on our side.
Yeah, and firms are more and more starting to see the need for this. So, to your point, there's been a lot of work over the last, 5 to 10 years within firms on maybe improving workflow efficiency and service within individual departments. Okay. And in some ways that has helped, kind of lay the foundation on this topic, because as people experience individual departments, both internally and externally, and they see a lot of positive things working, especially from a lot of the work you do with firms in those areas, now people are starting to look across the aisle, across departments, and say, how do we actually, have a better client experience overall? So leading into that, Ariana, what are some recommendations or some tips you have, for people to really start to either view client experience differently in their firm in terms of how they approach it, and or how they actually start to implement some things here?
I guess one of the first things is to understand where your firm is on, as far as where they stand on the evolution. So when we think about the evolution of client experience, John, you already mentioned having that focus on efficiency. And that's, I think, where the focus on client experience happened, even if it wasn't where it started, even if it wasn't necessarily intentional. It was really about how can we get a better product, higher quality product to the client with a quicker turnaround time? How can we service the client more efficiently? And so a lot of that led to focus on, then now that we're starting to do that, how can we add more value? But that was ultimately in the compliance areas, because the efficiency focus was, primarily in tax and audit, and how can we, be more efficient to get that product to the client. Now that we're starting to do that, how can we add more value to them with the capacity that we're creating? And then it transitioned into, okay, so now let's focus on those touch points within those compliant processes when we are, having that planning meeting with the client, when we are asking for information from the client, when we're delivering the deliverables to the client. How can we add more value to them? So we're starting to evolve there and thinking about what are they experiencing and how can we do something differently. But now it's really about connecting the dots. And instead of just thinking about those things individually, you're thinking about it across the organization. So you have to understand where you are in that evolution. Are you still just focused on, the experience within an individual service? Have you thought about what it looks like across the organization? Because you need to understand where you're starting from, and also having a good understanding around what is your current mindset towards client experience? Again, reiterating the fact that client service and client experience are two completely different things. We can be delivering a really high level of client service, but completely missing the boat when it comes to client experience across the firm.
You know, that's really great, Ariana. One thing I think firms struggle with as it relates to this topic is just how many clients they have and how different those clients are from one another. How do you see firms approach that aspect of the client experience as they start to try and figure out and build something for their clients internally?
Well, what we're seeing firms really lead with is focusing on their ideal client. So you obviously can't create an experience for every single client that the firm serves. But what you can do is focus on the experience for your ideal client. So think about how many services is that client, working with you on. What are those services? What are the revenues for that ideal client? What are the different touch points that they have across the firm? And so you build that profile of the ideal client so that you can get a good understanding of what their experience looks like as they're navigating through the different areas of the firm. And I think it's also important to understand that it's not only just about the services that ideal client is, that experience while they're actually getting those services delivered, that it starts all the way back with awareness about the fact that there are additional services that you can offer them. Because client experience and how we're communicating those different services to our clients across the different departments within the firm, we need to make sure that that's consistent. Then when they're considering, actually using those services with the firm, we need to be thinking about what does the consideration process look like? What does the decision experience look like? And then on to delivery. And even beyond that, how are we growing those ideal clients? So it's not just about the experience that they're having during the delivery of when they're working with us. Client experience is so much bigger than that. And that's part of the evolution of it, is expanding not only across the firm, but also in the breadth of what we're considering as far as the client's interaction with the firm.
That's excellent, Ariana. So as it pertains to this topic, I mean, there's lots of tangentially related components of this topic. One of them, though, has to do with outside the profession and kind of competition that we're seeing, happening in the accounting profession. So as it pertains to the evolution of client experience, what are you seeing happening outside just the core accounting profession that we should be aware of?
Just that client-centric focus, and really how clients are looking to have, and customers, consumers are looking to have a holistic experience that really fits into their everyday life and their everyday experiences instead of having it be an intrusion or an addition. They're really looking for it to blend in. Think about the way, that we're consuming things from our phones, from, in the moment, from having access wherever we are, from doing things digitally, and thinking about how does the accounting firm fit into people's everyday experience, into the business owner's everyday experience, into the individual's everyday experience, and making sure that it's not an outlier, but that it truly complements and adds value to the experience that they're having day to day. And so all of the things that are happening externally that we're experiencing in our day to day lives has an impact on the experience that firms should be delivering to their clients, so that there's really that, continuity and that blending, as opposed to, as I mentioned, having it be more of an outlier experience.
That's spot on, Ariana. And, one thing I'm seeing from a competition perspective is organizations that are not accounting firms, but want accounting firm clients, such as wealth management companies. We are seeing more and more them hiring CPAs to be able to package those compliance and transactional services with their more strategic advisory wealth management services, um, to offer that type of experience to their best clients. Now, a lot of, of the listeners here may have a wealth management practice. So you have just an opportunity there related to that. But we are seeing more and more competition come to, quote, take our clients, so to speak, to try and offer them, you know, a great experience that maybe you are missing right now.
Yeah, and so you have the two sides of it. So the one that you just mentioned, but then also the previous part is that we're having to compete for our clients' attention, essentially, in as we offer them more services. So when you think about the compliance services, they're the ones that are requirements that clients have to get. Right. There are things that they're not, volunteering to have happen, whether it be, the tax return or the audit and things like that. But when you offer them things that have more value, those are things where you really need to focus on understanding their experience and what adds the most value to them, because you're competing not only with those other organizations, but also you're just competing for their attention. Like, they need to understand that they actually need this. They need to understand how you can help. And if they have to look at a flyer that's on your front desk, in your reception area, in order to know that that is a way that you can add more value to them, thinking all the way back to, again, the awareness of client experience, you're competing for their attention in a way that's not even going to get their attention.
Yep, agreed. So, Ariana, as we close out our conversation here, for our listeners, what would be your recommendation for next steps? So when they end this podcast, if they could only do one or two things to kind of move forward in this area, what would your recommendation be?
First would be to understand, as I mentioned earlier, where they are as far as client experience, and then really make a commitment to get an understanding of where you want to go next. So really, I know you said just one thing, but those would be my two things. The first one is to understand where you are right now relative to client experience, and then determine where you want to be, because this is not just fluff, and it's not just, oh, maybe, if we want to focus on that. The changing dynamics of what's happening within the profession are making it a necessity to focus on the experience that your clients are having as they're working with your firm.
Fantastic, Ariana. As always, thank you for being on the podcast. It's always a joy speaking with you. For those listeners out there, If you like these topics, we change topics every week. This week, it may be technology or process. Next week, it'll be growth or talent. And so please subscribe to the podcast. We release new episodes every Tuesday morning. So please stay tuned for the next episode. All right, Ariana, thanks so much.
Thank you, John.
Bye.